Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are now going to move into our final speaker of the 2023 DINFO Social Media Forum. With us today, we have Tudor Mihalescu, who will be talking to us today about using AI to generate authentic social media engagement. Tudor Mihalescu is the co-founder and CEO of Speechify, a New York City-based technology startup offering AI-powered software for generating organic social media engagement. In recognition for his impact on the digital communications field, he was nominated on the Forbes Europe 30 Under 30 list in Law and Policy in 2017 and Forbes Romania 30 Under 30 list in 2018. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Tudor Mihalescu.
Thank you so much. Can you all hear me well? Thank you. No? Well, should I speak louder? Does that work? Okay, cool. I'll keep that pace. I don't want to assume anything, but given that we're at the social media forum, how many of you actually use social media in your work? If you can. Cool. That's good. I'm definitely in the right place. Also, how many of you are interested in generative AI? Nice. That's also a validation for your topic of your next event next year. One thing. I think I'll be needing this. Cool. So, what I'll be speaking to you all today is about how these two topics come together: social media and generative AI. And so we'll be speaking about AI-augmented social media, and we'll be walking through a couple of steps to understand what that is. A little bit about myself and how come I'm speaking to you about these topics. So I've spent the better part of the last 12 years at the intersection of the two. Before founding Speechify, I founded a social network for politics. So I've been building and working on social networks for a long time. I've been also researching social engagement. I was writing a column for Forbes on civic technology, where I was actually learning from other entrepreneurs who are doing similar things. But also, I've been spending a lot of time in the language creation space. Generative AI is primarily about language creation, also images. I actually did a PhD on speech writing, on how American presidents write their speeches. So I actually studied how language comes about, how language influences, how language comes together to serve also a government purpose. So as part of my PhD, I actually did interviews with presidential speechwriters all the way from Nixon to Barack Obama, and learned how different administrations in the government would collaborate on creating that language that then the United States president would use in their speeches. So today we'll be focusing on a couple of topics. I'll be putting things in perspective. So we'll speak about why organic social is important. And then we'll be flipping a switch and speaking about the evolution of AI and where we are now and what generative AI is. Then we'll speak about them combined so that we can learn more about what AI-augmented social media is and how that can help. And then we'll get a little bit more in depth into how to run organic social campaign at scale and how AI fits into that, which is what we're specializing in at Speechify. And then we'll have a Q&A session to actually discuss learning points, and I'm really excited to hear from all of you here. I understand there's a great group of folks who are spanning government, academia, and a lot of people here from the DoD, so that would be, I'm really excited about that. A little bit about Speechify. We launched the company in late 2019. What we focus on is helping organizations drive organic engagement as a reliable alternative or complement to digital advertising. The principle is very easy. Organizations draft social media posts that their community members can use to create their own authentic posts and share those on their own social networks. The product that we're launching, we call it a social share toolkit, which some of you may be familiar with. Whenever there is a launch of a press release or of a big initiative, marketers usually put together suggested posts that they share internally and ask everyone, hey, share these on your social media platforms. Well, we're bringing this to the next level. Ever since the platform was launched in late 2019, we've worked with more than 500 organizations and managed to enable the creation of more than 700,000 user-generated posts on all social platforms. So the community members of these organizations, and you can see a few on the screen, we work with, we've had the University of Virginia, also the Department of Agriculture, Novavax, the vaccine company, Cision, PR Newswire, the leader in PR services, or PepsiCo. All of these organizations, companies, government, use Speechify to get their community members to post on social and generate organic engagement. Flipping the slide and speaking a little bit more about why social media matters. I'm laying some stats over there, but we can speak about it also more informally. So organic social is a way to generate engagement in a way that is non-paid, where your community members, whether those are staff members, partners, in the case of companies, their customers, and so on, they share on social media about what the organization does. They do that organically, so they post on their own social media channels. In order for this to be powerful, obviously it needs to carry the message of the organization. If that is done right, then organic social is the most powerful form of advertising. And you have a couple of stats there to prove that. Putting things in context, it's been close to 20 years since Facebook was launched. It's insane to think of it that way, but the truth is that most Americans use social media in their daily life. It's become an extension of our physical selves. We all have communities that we've built online in much the same way we have them face-to-face. So that means that when one of us shares something on our social media channels, our friends are likely to engage with that, are likely to be influenced by it at a higher rate than any form of ad or influencer marketing. Like, many organizations engage in influencer marketing. The speaker just before me was also speaking about that. Organic social, which is regular people speaking to their friends and their networks, is almost 10x more powerful than influencer marketing because it's people speaking to their communities. If there is a way to do this right, this can become a very powerful way to engage people at scale. AI. There's been a big hype about AI in the last 6 or 7 months. It almost feels like it's something new, but it actually isn't. The artificial intelligence field has been around for close to 100 years now in different versions. Artificial intelligence is basically a way to solve problems by using technology. That's really what it is. And in a way that mimics the way the human brain makes decisions. And we've been a long way. Like the first time, the first inroads into what are now called neural nets happened in the 50s and 60s. And then for a very long time, people didn't really believe in them anymore. But progress happened in stages. The fascinating thing about artificial intelligence and neural nets is that it actually prompts us to speak about 2 ways of doing problem solving with machines. One of it is rule-based. The other one approximates more closely how the human brain works. So let me speak about the first one. Up until a couple of years ago, when you heard social media gurus speaking about social media, they would say things like, if you add more than 3 hashtags on Twitter, your post will be downgraded. That was because at that time, algorithms worked based on rules, which means if X happens, Y happens. And all of the recommender systems that would show people content in their news feeds work like that. So it was very easy to come up with rules and be like, top 10 tips to become more powerful in your social media. Don't do that or do that. These days, if you hear someone tell you with certainty that they know for a fact that if you do this on social media, you will get more engagement, they probably don't know what they're saying. And the reason for it is because for a few years now already, algorithms have moved to neural nets. A neural net functions in a very similar way to how the human brain works. I'll give you an example. If you raise a kid, you never know how they will react to things, but you want to do your best to surround them with the right environment. And even in those circumstances, you don't know how they will react fully. That's how neural nets act too. They're being referred to as black boxes in the sense that you cannot predict with certainty what's going to come out. You can just control the environment where they're in, so that you maximize the chances that the content that's going to come out is good. The reason why neural nets are very powerful is just because, in the same way that the brain works, they can take into account multiple variables, like hundreds of different variables at the same time, to come up with an output that is effective or that meets a purpose. That's something that the rule-based algorithm cannot do. And that's why more and more companies are relying on artificial intelligence in the form of neural nets to meet certain goals, because in one way, it approximates how the brain works, which means it's much more effective at taking into account multiple variables. Generative AI has been the subject of a lot of controversy recently. A lot of it is based on misunderstanding. Some of it is actually based on grounded in real concerns and also in a real understanding of opportunities. Before going into that, I just wanted to share a little bit about how I got to this field. So having studied language, I studied a lot how language gets built. So how words fall after each other. I was looking at patterns and so on. And when I finished my PhD, I Googled AI for speech writing. This was 2015. And I came across a name. His name was Valentin Kasarnik, who was at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst at that time. And he built an algorithm all the way back in 2016 that would create new political speeches based on previous congressional debates. This was all the way before the current hype. So we started speaking and trying to understand how to marry the social side, the social science part of creating language with the machine learning side of it. And it's fascinating. And what I can say is that in the last 6 months, the changes that happened in the generative AI space have really been exponential. But at the base, they're based on a technology that has evolved over the last 50 years. And what really is, for instance, many of you have heard of ChatGPT, is really a way to predict the next word based on a really big data set. And the results are becoming better and better. And they hit the point where they can actually be useful in the things, in the different tools that we're using on a day-to-day basis. And that's also one of the reasons why I'm here. We've actually seen, with Speechify, we've seen an increase from the number of customers who actually use AI-generated posts in their social toolkits from 1% to 60% over the course of 3 months. That's due to the quality of the language generation. So I do think we're at an inflection point, but it's also worth remembering that this technology has been around for close to 100 years now and has evolved gradually, even though it seems like it's taken sprints these days. So what can you achieve with organic social? Like going back to the first part of the first topic. You can really achieve the things you can achieve with advertising or with influencer marketing. You can do awareness campaigns about various things. These are measured in impressions and clicks. So this can be about press releases. This can be about CSR campaigns. This can be about social awareness or political awareness campaigns in various circles. This can be about engaging people on topics, relying on trusted messengers, and so on. The second one is social actions. You can get people to take action, signing up for events, signing up petitions, donating, purchasing, and so on. And the third one is talent acquisition and retention. You can enable staff members to then share about parts of their jobs. You can do amplify different profiles. You can do recruitment drives. Really, everything that can be done with advertising can be done in a much more efficient way with organic social, as long as it's done right and the community is being built the right way. Then, how can AI help with that? And a really interesting thing to consider here is that there is two ways of thinking about artificial intelligence. One of it is that it automates tasks. The other one is that it augments human capabilities. And we're going to speak a lot about the second one, what we call augmentation. Before I get to that, I was wondering how many of you can recognize the person in the middle? Just a show of hands. How many of you can recognize the two people on the side? Yeah? Do you know? Uh-huh. Both of them are speechwriters for Obama. The interesting thing with this picture is that Obama is considered one of the best speakers in history. His speeches are being taught in rhetoric classes and so on. But the thing that many people don't recognize is that Obama was always augmented. He had a team of speechwriters. You can see two of them in the picture, who are also considered some of the best speechwriters in history. Augmentation of people's skills is a long practice. It's just that before it was done by humans. With artificial intelligence, the promise is that everyone can be augmented in the tasks that they do. And this leads us to social media augmentation, AI augmented social media. So part of our vision at Speechify is that if we think of the online environment as an extension of our physical selves, there is a big lag in sociability. So these days, we cannot do online the same things we can do face-to-face. We're not as expressive on social media as we are when we meet face-to-face with people. And one of the causes for that is that in the online space, we actually live in a world that is regulated by algorithms. So what we see, what other people see, and how we engage with one another is actually decided and amplified by algorithms that run by rules that are not exactly the same as those of human sociology. They're influenced by many other different variables. They can change a lot. The most glaring example, for instance, is if at the end of 2021, you would post a picture of Instagram, that picture would get hundreds of likes and would get a lot of engagement. At the beginning of 2022, if you posted the same picture, it wouldn't get any likes anymore. That's because Instagram decided on a short notice that they wanted to start amplify videos because they wanted to compete more with TikTok, so they changed the algorithm, which caused a lot of uproar. It also put Instagram on a different path. But all that is to say is that algorithms actually regulate how we behave online, what we see, what we don't see. And using AI can actually help us understand those rules better and become more expressive. What do I mean by this? So I want to show you a couple of posts that were actually AI augmented. In this picture, this is a journalist who is posting on social media about the Associated Press. the Associated Press came up with this campaign where they wanted to make people understand that it's good to actually consume journalism that is fact-based. So they appealed to their community to post on social media about that if they agree with it. This post was actually created as a draft, and then the person posting it took that draft, customized it in their own way, and shared it on their own social media. This is another one. Stefan Ganz is part of the executive team at PepsiCo. He's actually their chief analytics officer. And at the beginning of this year, posted about a new initiative that the PepsiCo Foundation has that highlights black change makers. The same thing. This was a post that was created by a marketer. Then using AI, it was optimized for LinkedIn, and then Stefan Ganz took it, changed it in his own way, and then posted it on social media. Tammy Gordon. Tammy Gordon is a communications director at Novavax. This post is from 2022 when Novavax was accelerating at a very high pace because they had a big demand to fill in terms of building the COVID vaccine and then distributing it across the world. And Tammy shared this post on her own LinkedIn channel asking for leads for someone to join on her team. This post, again, she received it in a draft state with the main objectives of that position and everything, and then she just customized it and posted it on her own channels. We're speaking at the beginning of the US Department of Agriculture. This is a post that was shared by one of the partners at the US Department of Agriculture. Again, they were using a toolkit for this. A post was drafted, and then these affiliates would then take that draft, would make small changes to it, and then share it on their own social media channels. The alternative to this is people either not posting or posting in a way that doesn't really convey the message that the organization wants to share. So it's organic social that doesn't really meet a communications objective. The third alternative is someone would spend around 2 or 3 hours actually crafting something on their own, facing the anxiety of social posting, and then in the end not doing that, or maybe just posting something after a very long time. So this is just a way to improve that. Another example here is this is an attendee at a big conference in the public healthcare space, organized by 2 government agencies. And again, this attendee got a draft through a social share toolkit. They made changes, they added some of their own take on it, and then they shared it on their social media to announce that they were participating at the event. And then more people could click on the link, land on that page, and then share content. How is this happening? So at the very basic level, there's a couple of steps. A marketer, a communication person creates either a long-form text or a draft post of what they want their community members to share. Then they input that. I'm showing you examples from our platform because it's easy to explain, but the principle is basically the same. Once you create that post or multiple ones, you then want to optimize it for each social network. So actually that's part of the work that our algorithm does. It learns from the posts that are being shared to understand how to optimize it for each social network. You can also do that manually if you're really great at marketing, where you take that draft, you make variations for each social network, and then you give those variations to your community members so that they can share that one post, customize it, and share it with their networks, but knowing they use the right hashtags, it has the right length, it uses the right sequence of and structure of words, and so on. Knowing that these platforms are so different, you can even see the examples here. The same draft becomes 3 different posts depending on what social network you want to share it on, because these algorithms are so different. There is actually almost an arms race of the social platforms that want to differentiate themselves as much as possible. So the algorithms are actually very different. And you can see here some of those distinctions, whereas a Twitter post is short and snappy. Facebook is usually a very long-form content. It takes even a few paragraphs to write something that will get engagement. Instagram is somewhere in between, but it uses a lot of emojis, is much more interactive. Most regular folks don't know these differences. That's why influencers get paid so much money to post, because they are the ones who figured out these things. But there are ways to enable everyone to actually post in the right way on social networks. And then you create what we call a social share toolkit. You share that with your audiences. You can embed that in websites and emails, and then you can generate that kind of engagement. People go to the toolkit, they take a post, they customize it, they share it on their networks, and then you as an organization can track the engagement. And a really interesting comparison here that I think it's worth keeping in mind is we need to think in equivalence. How does organic engagement compare to engagement we would get through ads? And we've done that comparison. So we're looking at the clicks and the impressions generated through posts shared organically, and we compare to how much money it would take to generate this kind of engagement through advertising. And it's the reason, the beauty of this is that it's actually a very precise figure. So on average, every user-generated post that's been shared through our platform, but I think it's also valid throughout, is worth $88. So every post that a user shares organically on their own social channels about what the organization wants them to say, as long as it's on message, it generates engagement of around $88. If you put things into context, you realize that it's actually worth investing in this, and that it can actually save a lot of money, but also generate really powerful engagement. And there are a few ways you can do to build these kinds of communities. Like, one important way is to create trust and to explain to user why it's critical to share. People spend a lot of time on their social networks. They consume a lot of content, but if you explain to these communities why it's also important for them to engage and share, they will do that. It's important to make it easy. Social media, like when someone gives their clout to an organization, it's kind of like a donation. In much the same way as most orgs make donation as easy as possible in just one click, it's the same thing with sharing. It needs to be as easy as possible for people to be able to do it easily. Like when we started the company, we took inspiration from a lot of orgs that would put together Google Docs or Dropbox folders with images, and they would send those to their community members, and those people would need to download the entire file, then copy and paste manually. They would go to their social network. They would lose stuff on the way, and at the end of a 15-minute process, they would probably end up posting something that wasn't perfect, and that created a lot of friction. It needs to be very easy. Another very important thing here is learning and teaching how to post for the right audience. So one thing is obviously the optimizations that happen when you understand what social networks people should be posting on, but there's a lot of things, a few other things there that are very important. And wanted to move back here for that, because I really love the speechwriter comparison. There's a model here that I like to call RAR. A speechwriter thing, when they write for a president, in this case, the analogy is a marketer who writes for their audience, they need to take into account three things. Is the content relevant? So what I'm giving these people, is it on message so that when they post it, they know they will actually carry over a message that makes sense? The second one is authenticity. How do we make sure we teach these people who are sharing to add their own authentic spin or voice to it, but in a way that still conveys the message, because otherwise it's not valuable. And the third one is the resonance. So there's one practice in speech writing is that the president has people who go across the country and they take local cues about things that then go into speeches. right? References to local culture, references to like words used in that area, jargon, and so on. It's the same thing on social media. One thing to take into account is that platforms are different, but also depending on who you want to share, the language in those posts needs to actually match that. If you want Gen Zers to share, you should probably be using language that Gen Zers are much more likely to share. So one version for an audience that spans 50 to 70-year-old will probably not work. If you want students to share about things, you should be focusing on the things that students are much more likely to care about, because the reaction you want to have when someone actually sees a draft post is, oh my God, this is exactly what I would have said if I had the time to write this myself. And that's what the speechwriter does. Their main goal is authenticity. So it's the same thing here. Another important thing here that can actually be solved with social toolkits is alleviating social anxiety. Social networks create a lot of anxiety because it's actually, so in face-to-face interactions, it's almost impossible to speak to thousands or tens of thousands of people at the same time. Right? It's very difficult to recreate that kind of environment. In the online space, we do that all the time. Or at least we know we have the potential to do that. Right? So there's platforms like TikTok or Instagram where if you have a public profile, or Twitter, in theory, you can go viral and everyone can read it. It's a very high bar for someone to get to. And that's why there's a lot of social anxiety associated with it. So using toolkits to guide people in how to speak about things actually reduces that social anxiety a lot, because they know there is someone who's an expert who's thought well and hard about how they should be doing things, how they should be thinking, and is willing to guide them through that process so that when they share, they're safe. They don't need to think about all of these things. They just only need to think about supporting that message and being authentic, but in a way that wouldn't create problems down the line. For instance, the perfect example here is we work with a few companies in highly regulated sectors where employees want to share about what they're doing on social media because they're proud about it, but there are legal implications to that. So they actually need to rely on the company's legal counsel vetting draft posts before they can share those publicly so that they know they're safe when they're posting them. It's the same thing here, alleviating social anxiety. Reminding community members that donating social clout is valuable is very important. We do that a lot in face-to-face interactions, speaking of like trusted messengers and asking people to pass the word on to their friends. But it's very important to educate people that in the social media space, it's as important. And if you also put a monetary value to that, it's even more important. Do regular trainings. One of the things we've seen a lot of successful organizations who do social sharing at scale is they actually train their community members on how to do social media, how to post, how to behave online. It's the same thing here. If we think of our online selves as an extension of our physical selves, we need to teach people how to behave. Very few people actually have received any training or education about how to behave on social media. We just assume that it's, yeah, you just go on social media and do whatever. Well, if it's such a big, important part of our existence, there should probably be some education that goes into how people behave on social media. Another thing that's important here is to distinguish between one-time sharers and regular sharers. In our work with organizations and companies, we've seen this distinction where on the one side, there are people who are willing to share a lot, for instance, staff members, right? They have a stake in the organization they work for, and they're willing to share a lot of things on a regular basis. But there's also people who share at one point, maybe because they're only interested in one topic, maybe because there's a very important campaign that targets a lot of them. For instance, we did quite a bit of work in the public health space where people would use toolkits to share with their friends on rules about how to wash their hands, how to keep themselves safe during COVID, and so on. These are not people that would share just everything, but they thought that particular piece of content was important and worth them promoting. And that's a really important distinction to keep in mind. I just wanted to wrap up with what types of social sharing campaigns we've seen and how those can work. Onboarding toolkits, right? So when someone joins an organization, they can then share with their networks that they joined. Toolkits for press releases and special announcements. Every time there is a big announcement coming up, and just as a segue into it, we're actually now partnering with Cision and PR Newswire on rolling this out widely in the United States. The engagement that can be generated on press releases from members of one's community has a very high potential. So you want those people to be able to share about that press release widely, or blog articles or announcements. Shareable hubs for community members. I was mentioning getting staff to post about various things. Embedding these ready-made posts in blog articles, media room pages, or articles. One of the fascinating things to me these days, I was actually speaking to one of my friends who's actually an expert in misinformation and disinformation, and she was telling me that in most cases when information that is not accurate is being shared online, is not because people are willingly sharing or knowingly sharing information that is not accurate. They just think it's accurate and then just share it because they think they're doing something good, when that information is actually not accurate. Adding shareable suggestions to press articles, for instance, to inform and educate the readers on how they should share this information correctly is actually something that I hope we'll get to see more and more, where it actually becomes part of the reporting hygiene, as it were, where whenever you publish something online, you also tell your readers, these are the right ways or the accurate ways you should post this on your Twitter, on your Facebook, in a way that actually spreads the accurate information, not putting certain spins to it. Obviously, people can disregard that, but at least you make sure that people share things in the right way. Toolkits for partners, attendees for event promotion, for instance. Like you attend an event and you want people to share about this event so that more people sign up. This is an easy way to do that. And toolkits for CSR awareness, promotion, and so on, which is anything that has a social component or a social good component. People want to share those because they feel they make the world better. But in most cases, they need some help in actually drafting those things. And one that I'm actually fascinated by, one of my colleagues who worked in the HR space before keeps telling me, good people know good people. The easiest way to hire right is when people who are already in the organization share with their friends about that experience, because they probably know people who are in a similar position, and they can then bring in good applications. And that wraps it up.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll open up the floor to questions.
So I've got about 6 questions. I'm going to ask one, which is how we stay abreast of algorithms. So on our team, there are 3 things that we do to try to stay on top of this. We conduct our own analysis to see how things are going. We conduct this in tranches over the course of a variety of different periods. We look for platform disclosures, because occasionally Meta or Twitter, not so much anymore, will put out and say this is how things work. And the third thing is expert insight. So where should we go to stay atop and abreast of what these changes are, especially as ML is going to progress at a much faster rate and, as you said, more exponential over the last 6 months?
Can you also share what team you're working on?
So I'm the analyst for a national level agency. So we have an entire country to go and see how our posts are doing.
That makes sense. So I think the things you're already doing are the right things to do. One thing I would also encourage, and this is the work that we're doing, I actually think that there should be more disclosures from the software companies in terms of the algorithms themselves. So how we're doing things and how we understand how the social networks change is we look at what's being shared through our platform and what engagement that gets. So we match the content with the engagement, and then our algorithm develops predictions for what works on each social networks. If there is a way to get that kind of data also in other ways, for instance, scrape public posts where you look at what's being shared and then the engagement it gets and do that on a regular basis and interpret that to actually understand how these algorithms change. I actually think that that's the best way to do that because it's impossible also for an expert to tell you exactly, unless they're in the companies, to tell you exactly how these platforms are changing and how these algorithms are evolving. And I hope there is more disclosure into the algorithms, or at least experts are actually allowed to embed in these companies to understand how these algorithms are changing in a way that actually brings more accountability to it.
Thank you.
Hi, Riley Wilson, NIST. I know that you've touched on social sharing campaigns a lot in your presentation and also some employee advocacy. And I'm so sorry to do this, but I feel like I have to give a little bit of a warning to other feds out there that there could be, and there are in the case of my parent agency, Department of Commerce, a lot of ethical issues when it comes to both of those cases. In the case of social sharing, it's the implication of covert propaganda. So anything that is published on behalf of an agency but is not labeled as being agency content is considered covert propaganda, and we're not allowed to do that. That's the same reason why, if anyone in the audience has heard of Thunderclap, and that was something that we were using a lot a couple of years ago, and it's faded away, and that's the reason it's faded away. And in terms of employee advocacy, there was also a bit of guidance passed down from the Office of Government Ethics, I think, related to the ethics of sort of peer pressuring your employees to post on your behalf on their own personal accounts. So again, I'm really sorry to bring that up, but I feel like it's pretty necessary for us.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. And I think one of the things, so a couple of things. The reason why Thunderclap shut down is actually because they were relying on automatic posting. So the way Thunderclap worked is that the people would connect their socials, and then at one point in time, Thunderclap would post on their behalf, which is automated posting. People had no control on on when that was going out because they were just connecting their socials. And it shut down in 2018 because after the Cambridge Analytica scandal, obviously, Facebook decided to stop automatic posting. It's come back now in various ways. So employee advocacy apps also use automatic posting again. Our approach has been that.
I'm speaking specifically for government federal agencies.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, Thunderclap shut down completely then. I think on the issue of sharing information, and it's one point of view, obviously. I think that there's many different ways to look at it, and you brought up a very good point. What we've seen during COVID times and even before is that most agencies actually put up toolkits on their website with suggested messaging. Right? We've seen that in various instances where people can share if they want to, but if they want to, these are ways to make sure they share accurate information.
Yeah, I should have clarified. This is guidance that was brought down by my agency specifically saying that we couldn't do that anymore. We can provide that to any organizations so if anyone else from other agencies has gotten different guidance, I'd love to hear it too.
Sure, and I'm obviously not an expert in those guidelines, and I think this is very welcome information. On our side, what we're trying to do is to make sure that all of the content that is being posted is posted by people who want to post it. So there's no automated aspect into that, which I think is very important. But yeah, I think I really appreciate that. And I think that speaking about these things publicly to actually understand what's the best way to make sure we marry the need for more engagement and generating organic engagement and doing that in an accurate way is the best way to go.
Sir?
Thank you. Dylan Brunel, Corps of Engineers, Charleston District. As we're all from federal agencies, and more specifically the DoD, we all know that the federal government and DoD isn't the quickest to adopt new technologies and things like AI. So my question is, do you have any DoD customers or federal agencies that use your platform that way? When I go back and my Office of Counsel inevitably comes to me and says, well, this isn't approved or this is approved, why are we doing this? Do you know if there are any DoD customers that y'all have?
So at the moment, we've worked with a couple of agencies, not specifically DoD, but we've worked through a partnership we have with Cision and PR Newswire, specifically for press releases, with the use case of I put out a press release, and then we give a couple of options that are embedded in the press release for people who want to share about the press release to be able to use, and then share on their own platforms. That's been the use case we've had so far, but obviously we're interested in engaging more. I don't believe we've worked directly with DoD on any campaign.
Hi, Erica Spray with the VA Research. When you started speaking about this, I was a little confused, and I think I understand it, but I wanted to confirm. Sure. You're talking about with these toolkits when a draft for a social media post is prepared, and then it's shared with the user, like an agency leader, and they can personalize that and to post on different platforms. That's something that's generated by AI, or is there, you mentioned a subject matter expert who would first provide the draft?
Yes, that's correct. So the subject matter expert, as you call it, or the marketer creates a draft.
Right.
And then they can use our AI copywriting tool to optimize that for different social networks, but then they approve it.
So it goes back.
That's correct. It goes to legal approval afterwards, and then when it's done, they decide to publish them on these toolkits.
Right.
So at the moment, there is no AI that just creates content without supervision.
And so technically, it's not automated. It's not like you have a program that just spits out this information you
That's
have no
correct.
control over.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. So AI is being used to augment.
Right.
Yes, exactly.
Which actually, I could see where it would be helpful in terms of, saving time. And because, I used to go through and manually write a post, one for Twitter, one for Facebook, one for Instagram, and it took quite a bit of time to think about hashtags and how I wanted to personalize that. So
that's exactly the purpose of it. That's
Yeah.
what I was saying. It's augmentation, and it happens in a way where the human is before and after. Right? It's meant to save time, and it's meant to create those optimizations where the user actually has more insight into how the social networks privilege certain information.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sir?
Hi, my name is Chris Fowler. I'm with Booz Allen. Quick question for you. How is your training data diversified to mitigate for human bias prior to a solution being deployed?
That's a great question. So we've done a few things here. One is because we don't create content from scratch, there's a communicator who puts in a draft. So we're only making optimizations on that draft, which means that the changes that happen are happening in a very controlled way. And then the communicator needs to approve that. Right? So it's essentially a human that looks at it and then approves it, which is different from a recommender system that just recommends content to people without any supervision whatsoever. Right? So we always keep the human in the loop for all of these versions. Another thing we've taken into account is basically the algorithm then learning from the content that one organization is putting on toolkits. But another thing here to keep in mind is also that these social posts are then going into a universe where other algorithms are then, and they're amplifying those. And that's a problem that is very interesting, where how do you, and one of the things where we think is very interesting is that understanding how the algorithms work actually brings more accountability into the space, in the sense of whenever we uncover any biases in how the content comes back and our users flag that, that's an indication for us that, the algorithms of the social networks themselves in certain cases have specific biases. And this is something that as we grow as a company, we're a startup, right? So we're still early stage. We can then start speaking publicly more and more about, hey, we encounter these biases when in certain types of user-generated content.
Hi, how's it going? My name is Michel Saray with Pittsburgh District, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. The slide that you had up with President Obama and the two speechwriters on his side, I thought was really, really instructive on shaping this conversation of how you use that as an example of how augmenting talents or augmenting a speaker is something that's been going on for ages, just through human talent rather than through technology. And little side anecdote, and I'll get to my question, is, recently we had an incident where we operate and we celebrate locks and dams. We build and manage dams to prevent flooding. One of our dams recently hit 75 years. We had to do a speech writing, and a member of our team was tasked to do the writing, and she felt really overwhelmed because we had a ton of things going on that week, and this thing was basically coming up in no time. I said, just go to ChatGPT, write a speech, give it to the commander, polish it up, and you're done. I felt like there's absolutely no ethical qualm with that, because at the very core, that commander was going to be delivering a speech that was written for him. So in my mind, I'm thinking, what difference does it make if it's a machine who wrote it versus a human? Ultimately, the commander gets to get credit for delivering the speech that people either may or may not remember. But are there areas in AI where you feel like there's a black and white ethical boundary that you would not cross?
Yeah, so going to that point, in my mind, the way this works is a human provides an input, and then the algorithm can help do the work that a human would do in 3 hours, but in 10 minutes. And then the human edits it, and then they can use it, right? So that's how I think these can be used right now. These algorithms are not good enough to do stuff like that unsupervised. They're simply not. Like, so any case where an AI provides an output that then goes into the world without people being able to actually edit it and press the publish button, in any case, is a problem. Like, to me, that's where the problems arise, where it's being used not to augment, but actually to automate, because that's really the thing. When the AI works on its own, that's automating humans rather than just expanding their capabilities. That's where I think there is an issue. And I can tell you, generative AI right now is not good enough for that. It's definitely not good enough for that. There's many instances where we could also say that recommender systems, which are the AI that is now powering most algorithms, are also in certain cases not good enough for that. And that's where the question of bias comes up, where an algorithm makes decisions on doing one thing or another, and then there is no human that looks at that at the final version. That needs to be really bulletproof. And that's where you speak about life and death decisions and so on. That's my thinking.
I think you just got to turn it on. Yeah.
Great last week, or yesterday, but not today. So my name's Aaron, and I am a speechwriter. So, how quickly before algorithms destroy my career? And what resources do you suggest that I learn about algorithms just because I want to do better at understanding how to engage? Are there books? Because in my head, by the time it makes it into a book, it might already be outdated. Should I go to the websites and read the very dense legal words? How do you learn about algorithms in a way that, somebody with me, a speechwriter brain, can also understand it?
That's fascinating. So I'll share something from, when I was studying speech writing, there's something that struck me. So whenever a speechwriter would write a speech for Nixon, Nixon had one thing that he would always ask, which is, what sentence in this speech do you think the media is going to pick up? And if the writer couldn't mention one or two potential headlines, Nixon would say, okay, just go write it because that means it's not good enough. Today, any communication we write should be amplified on social. So I think writing speeches, thinking of what parts of those speeches can actually be easily shared on social media is something to take into account. Like, thinking of it as any piece of communication will then live in the online environment, and how can we write this piece so that people can easily share and amplify that with their networks. Right? I think, to me, this is the biggest distinction. In terms of resources, there's a lot out there. I think a lot of the basic rules of speech writing still remain. It's just a matter of understanding how those change for the social media space. And because things are moving so fast, I don't think there is a book, right? It's just more like looking at various examples of what people are doing, like learning about case studies of really successful speeches that got amplified. But also, like, not all communications have the same purpose. One really interesting thing, so at the beginning of the century, how a president's speech would be judged was how many claps it got into the Congress. Like, so there would literally be an aide who would just count how many claps they heard in Congress when the president was speaking. But on the other end of the spectrum, let's take, I think most people regard George Bush Sr. as one of the most boring speakers that was ever at the bully pulpit. But George Bush Sr. presided over the reunification of Germany, the collapse of the Soviet Union, and the end of the Cold War. In that case, every speech that he was delivering actually had multiple audiences to take into account. So how many people actually clapped was not probably the primary audience on that. So any piece of communication needs to manage between all of these multiple audiences and objectives. So in the end, maybe like some speeches should be amplified on social, like just going back and contradicting my first point. Some speeches are made for something else. Some pieces of communication are meant to just be consumed internally. So it really depends a lot.
Yeah.
Hey, Aaron. So I deal with this right now with some of my younger DINFOS trained killers and talking about the ethics behind ChatGPT, behind AI and how to augment what they do to make them faster and more efficient. So just a side story, I started off in IT in the 1990s before Google. So it took us a really long time to troubleshoot something over a phone, trying to tell people what buttons to click while I troubleshooted it in my head on the other side. Then I got this thing called TechNet, which was kind of like a big giant FAQ that I could go look up some of the problems. And then Google happened. So I did spend 20 years, and all that Google did was augment my ability to search for the answer to the problem, the technical problem. I was the expert because I can Google search it better than you can because I knew the technology behind what I was looking for. So I got to what we call Google Foo, right, which is I can look up things really fast and effectively and know what I'm looking for because I'm a professional. So the same thing I would recommend with AI and learning how to use this technology. Right now, for me, it's just play with it, So I have an account, I play with it, I practice giving it different inputs. I can tell it to write an Associated Press style. I can say I want an inverted pyramid. So you can start working on that where, because you already know so much, that you know what right inputs to put in to get exactly what you're looking for out. And people can't replace us in our field yet for that. So that's my recommendation, is just play with it.
And that makes a lot of sense. To give another example, there is, when I was in primary and secondary school, rote learning was still important, right? So you had to be prepared to learn things by heart because you should remember that and use those. Then Wikipedia came along. And then people just realized that what they should be good at is actually knowing where to look for the right information and how to cross-check whether that information is accurate or not before they start using it, which is a completely different skill than just learning and memorizing by heart someone that teachers tell you in class, right? So things change, and I think that point is really, really valuable. It's a matter of us adapting our skills to actually become more effective with the technology we have, we can use, but making sure that technology actually meets our goals and serves us rather than the other way around. I don't believe in technology just for technology's sake. I believe that, for instance, I do different trainings, and one of those was, okay, how do you use an AI tool successfully? And really, I think the ground principle is thinking of AI as just another way of building software. Is this software with AI 10 times more effective for me in what I'm doing than the software I'm using now? That's really that's the promise of AI, that it can actually become more effective in doing things for folks at a higher efficiency rate than they're doing right now. If it doesn't match that, whatever your threshold is, 3 times more effective, 5 times more effective, 10 times more effective, then you shouldn't try it. That's really the thing. Like how we started was, and some of these examples, by the way, were actually the ones that I showed you. Some of those were really human augmentation, right? Before we actually brought AI into the product, where some of these organizations were creating the posts manually. They were putting those into a toolkit, and then their community members would take that, manually created, make adjustments, and then share it, right? How we brought AI into it was because our customers said, I don't know how to write these drafts. I really don't know. Like, I don't know what hashtags to use. I don't know how Instagram is different from Facebook. I don't know how to create multiple variations. I don't have the time for it. Can you give me something that just automates part of my task? And that's how AI came into it, like really on a very specific use case, because people asked for a more effective way of doing things. I actually think that's probably the best way to think of technology, which is focused on a very specific use case and how that can make you more effective.
Well, Mr. Mihalescu, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you. On behalf of the Defense Information School, Colonel McNorton would like to present you with a certificate of appreciation for your time,
I really
as well as a
appreciate it.
command coin. Thank you.
That means a lot. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, to close out our 2023 Social Media Forum, Colonel Richard McNorton, the Commandant of the Defense Information School, Colonel Richard McNorton.
I'd like to thank all the presenters for their fantastic and timely presentations. Hopefully all of you took something away from that. I'd also like to thank Captain Morris for being the host. Great job. And Lieutenant Commander Smith, where is she? Is she back there somewhere? Oh, there she is, for organizing this event, pulling everybody together, doing all the logistics. And our team behind the cameras and with the microphones and filming this and live streaming this event. Yeah, and our logistics team to keep the temperature as cool as possible here, which is a big challenge because we're going through an HVAC upgrade, which is going to take a couple years to finish, but they made sure we had all these portable ones here to keep you as comfortable as possible. And so the topics today, I know there was a lot of interest in AI and what holds in the future. We're very engaged in that topic here. We've just published this month our Code of Ethics and Standards for our students and faculty members for the use of AI. And we've got our team, which Lieutenant Commander is our lead for AI, exploring opportunities in all of our courses, how to leverage that technology, whether it's for instructors to assist in grading so that they can spend more time coaching, training, or mentoring, what we inform our students in our MCF courses and our officer producing courses so that they're knowledgeable, but also the tools that we can use to maintain that competitive advantage in the information space. Because we know our adversaries are going to be using that, and they're going to be using it against us. And so if we don't understand the tools and if we're not leveraging that, then that advantage that we have, which it's the biggest thing, it's that trust and confidence, will erode. And so we're looking at ways and making sure that we identify the right solutions that we can use on our networks, which is some of the challenges with some of those tools out there. And so the focus of our next conference is going to be heavy into AI with what we've learned by having the staff identify some of those tools that are will be approved, if not now or in the future on FedRAMP, and how we can leverage that. But what is clear is we're always going to have that human in the loop. But to get a draft release that's 80% done in 3 minutes when you haven't slept for 14 hours and reviewing it, making sure it's factual, because ultimately we're the ones releasing, that's where we see the help. When we got to inform our audience because of a natural disaster or an aircraft down or combat operations, creating content for social media posts, I mean, to have 70% of that solution done for you is going to be very helpful. And so those are the things that we're taking a look at and how it could augment us. But again, always a human in the loop. But some of the with the teams that we have right now, that we know we're not going to do is alter images or videos, as I mentioned yesterday, or audio, because that's where we would lose that trust and confidence. What we'll always maintain, especially with the DINFOS trained killers, is that what we put out is factual. And with all that noise that's out there, if it's from the Department of Defense or the U.S. government, that it's factual and true. And so please stay connected with us on our digital media channels, to include our podcasts. These are some of the topics we're going to discuss there and some of the announcements for other forums that we have. We have a lot of recordings that are going to be released on the 15th of each month on the DINFOS Way. Either you can get through pretty much in all wherever you listen to your podcast, it's located, and specifically on our DIVIDS site. And I'm going to be leaving my business card up here. If you have some suggestions for some topics that we should either on podcast or for our next forum, I'd be very interested in that. And also on the back, it's the little QR code for Pavilion. We spend a lot of money keeping that site up, and so I'm always justifying, as it's over $1 million a year to keep that up there. But I see that as a way of staying connected to all of you, providing training materials, keeping you informed. Our students use it here. But we track the daily visitors, the weekly visitors on that. I brief it in order to support maintaining funding for that, as well as our MTT. So the more you use it, the more you share, the better it is for us, and we can create more content and put it on that site. Again, thank you very much for being here, and I hope you enjoyed your stay.